I'm Duncan McLeod, and this is the TechCentral Show, brought to you today by MTN Business. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe on youtube.com/TechCentral or follow TechCentral on social media. I'm joined now by two pioneers in South African e-commerce. The pair founded Superbalist, the online fashion retailer later acquired by Takealot Group. Today, though, Jedeikin, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Luke, and Claude Hanan are leading a new upstart called Bash inside the TFG Group. And that used to be known as the Foschini Group. Is it still, that's the former name, right?
Foschini is the jewel and the crown.
Right.
So yes, both are used interchangeably.
They're used interchangeably, okay. The Foschini Group, it's a listed entity. And from what I can see, I don't follow the retail sector very closely, but TFG seems to be outperforming many of its peers in retail. Why is that? Why is TFG doing so well, guys?
Well, look, I think the retail industry has been under quite a lot of pressure in South Africa over the last 5 years.
Right.
So there's been margin pressure that has impacted everyone on the back of consumer pressure, consumer health. I think what TFG has done really well, which is partly why we were excited by the opportunity, is they're alive to the need to change. They're alive to what's on the horizon. They're not sitting on their laurels of their past success. They're a 100-year-old business. And I think there was this almost golden age of retail in SA for the listed retail sector over the past 20 years. And there's a number of reasons we believe why new competition, market dynamics have made things a bit tougher. So it's almost like an investment cycle, an investment phase now. Some are choosing not to do it. And of course, you can retain profits and not invest in the future, or you can invest in the future. So that's what excited us about TFG.
Okay.
And I mean, we can talk to what we're doing to assist with that journey.
Absolutely, and I want to delve in some detail into what you guys are doing at TFG. But let's look a bit at the backstory, because there's a really interesting backstory here. And you guys have been in business together for some time. You must really like each other. You've gone into business twice now, Luke. How did you first meet?
It gets stranger, but we went to school together.
Okay.
And we mixed in the same circles. We were friendly, but we weren't sort of friends to the point that it would be uncomfortable working with each other for the decade plus that we have. And so we knew one another well. We knew the backstory of one another, but sort of outside of school, pursued slightly different paths. Claude went into finance. I went more into law and then advertising. And the story began in our naivety. Claude called me up. He'd been on a trip and he'd picked up a Fortune magazine. And the cover story was around Groupon. And it looked simple enough. He said, you, marketing, websites, can't we do this? And I said, of course we can. The rest is kind of history. But yeah, we go way back. And it's strange. We share a birthday.
You share a birthday, okay.
Same year, same day.
Amazing. What day? What day is that?
19th of December.
19th of December.
Yeah, we look forward to our TechCentral gift.
Great. So you formed essentially a Groupon type company in those early days, and that then morphed into Superbalist, did it?
Correct.
That's right.
Take us through that journey.
So I guess we read up about Groupon and this phenomenon, at the time the fastest growing business in the history of commerce, $0 to $1 billion. Like Luke said, we agreed to try it.
Yeah.
That was mid-2010. We spent 7-8 months building, planning, I guess, whilst working other jobs. By the time we launched early 2011, there were 45 clones in the market. So almost from the get-go, and it worked pretty well. So the demand was there.
Yeah.
It was quite a moment in time, I think, for South African e-commerce, because there was a lot of adoption on the back of it. Massive discounts on things people want, massages, restaurants,
The idea behind these businesses being that there would be a daily deal available.
Correct. Daily
that
deal
would be
available
massively
to
discounted.
consumers and to the supplier, new customers.
And remember, this is sort of right after the 2008 financial crisis.
Right.
So huge amounts of excess inventory.
Right.
We started in 2010, which meant Groupon was maybe 18 months ahead.
Yeah.
So it was easy enough to be a bit of an inventory scavenger.
Right.
There was a lot of appetite from businesses that had excess inventory.
And experiences as well. Groupon and us focused on experiences initially, which was like, I don't know, trips up Table Mountain, restaurants, massages, etc. But what we realized very early is that there's just zero barriers to entry. So it is so much so that we often talk about having customers who would call us to complain in the early days about coupons that they didn't actually even buy from us. They bought from competition, but it was impossible to even tell the difference between these competitors. There was no differentiation whatsoever.
Right.
So that was kind of the catalyst to pivot into something more defensible. And Luke can
which then became
take it from
Superbalist.
there. Yeah,
but
became
what before we go on to that, what went wrong with that Groupon type model? We know Groupon got into a lot of trouble, and a lot of these companies just went to the wall. It seemed like a good idea at the time. What was actually wrong with the model, and why did consumers turn away from it?
It's a race to the bottom. So mechanically, the proposition was this. It was that you've got a restaurant, your restaurant seats 100. Right now, there are many nights a week where you're at 50% capacity. So you can either go to market and buy marketing to drum up demand, whatever your marketing or channel strategy is, or let us use this excess inventory, the space, to do a deal, and it will encourage trial. And the key mechanic which changed, but if you recall in the beginning, there was a tipping point. So the way the deal worked was that it demanded a degree of virality. So it would say, if 1,000 people take up this coupon, it will unlock a deal at 50% off. And it became incredibly powerful. So everyone in the US wanted, I think one of the most successful deals of all time was something as simple as an Amazon book voucher at a certain discount. And many millions of people, you would auth your card, and only if the right number of people tipped it over would it settle. And so that then encouraged participants to tell their friends and drive the virality. So the argument was, we're not just discounting your inventory, we're actually creating word of mouth, creating a bit of hype around it. And that worked for a while. But to Claude's point, when you have many, many competitors come online simultaneously, how do you beat the competition? You either lower the tipping point or increase the discount, which is a race to the bottom on your margin. And eventually, if you take it to your logical extreme, that tipping point vanished entirely, and it just became websites full of coupon, which undermined the value proposition to the business. Were you actually bringing new customers or just offering their inventory for free?
I think it broke on the supplier side. Ultimately, our customers are happy.
They ran out of stock,
and they don't want that business.
Right.
It's like they tried it maybe 2, 3, 4 times
and didn't like it,
and they didn't like it enough to continue with it. And so much so we needed to pivot. There was a business at the time in the States called Fab.com, which focused on design product, like not your run-of-the-mill homeware, but a design aesthetic that didn't quite exist elsewhere. And we pivoted into something like Fab.com while still retaining the coupon aspect of the business. But we needed to rebrand for the sake of suppliers and for building out inventory.
What was your brand at the time?
City Mob.
City Mob, right.
Yeah, and suppliers didn't want to deal with City Mob 2 years into group buying. Especially not any major suppliers, whatever category you want to get into if you want some of the bigger international
inventory. We were saying moving from virtual product being experiences, which was a PDF coupon, to traditional retail products, goods. And so if you went to a Nike or a G-Star, it was a swear word that your legacy was.
Oh, you like
was
Groupon?
deals.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we don't do that. We don't do off price. So it necessitated a
rebrand, and customers hated us for it.
Really?
You know, that's something that we can talk to this recent experience, because you know, the rebrand involved with Bash was also the 2-3 months post the rebrand are fairly
difficult,
intense for the team undergoing or managing it.
We've done it a few times. We did it with Spree as well.
We did it with Spree when we merged Spree.
Customers hate change, and they won't understand your vision.
Yeah,
they you know
they refuse to.
They refuse to, but you have to have conviction.
People are creatures of habit. Yeah.
But just on the tech side, I think what was great about that era is the reason 45 businesses emerged was it was a remarkably easy website to get going.
Right. Low barriers to entry.
It was essentially a 2-page website. Page 1 was a deal.
Right.
Page 2, pay for it. And you didn't have to hold inventory.
Right.
So you sent a sales team to essentially agree to a sales contract. What is the length of the deal? How many participants? At what price and margin? And then you emailed your consumer over email a PDF.
Right.
Yeah, that was the delivery. Done.
So
no doorbell rings.
So it allowed,
couriers.
yeah, and it allowed guys like us that didn't have an engineering or a computer science background to dabble in the space. And there's many alumni from that time that started in group buying and then kind of ended up, as we did, migrating into real e-commerce.
Yeah. So why did you choose fashion?
So on this design, so there was another kind of zeitgeist around the 2010s, which was design. You think design in Durban, a lot of the concept, the conferences were about good design, and we suddenly saw a huge amount of Scandinavian design, throughout the world and in stores. And what we liked about it is in group buying, you're scavenging really. You're going around to a base of potential suppliers and saying, do you have excess inventory? And then you need to curate from that and try create like a nice consumer proposition. But you never know what you're going to get. And so the point is we had a huge variety of inventory across various categories. So we were selling off-price footwear. We were selling off-price Tupperware. We were selling off-price consumer electronics. And we thought, what is a consumer-friendly umbrella that can take what is actually a hodgepodge of categories, and kind of just move it away from this group buying image? And this was fab.com, and we thought, okay, design's an interesting moniker, because what is design? Anything can be design. And that allowed us to kind of reimagine our supplier base. And in that first iteration, we were doing, I believe it was 5 categories, but we were doing art, we were doing apparel, we were doing consumer electronics, we were doing homeware, and still had one foot in deals. And of the categories, what we found was apparel was remarkably underserviced online. And it's quite sticky from a retention point of view, because your annual order frequency, you need new clothes. They burn down in a way that buying a toaster doesn't. How often do you need a new toaster? So we started kind of understanding consumer behavior a little bit. We looked at that category and thought, what, there's actually a bit of a moat, or at least it's quite underpenetrated online. And so we went from some group buying to 5 categories, 4 of which were design, and then eventually kind of merged straight into doubling down with fashion. And that decision was the birth of Superbalist.
Superbalist, okay.
Which as a name was the antithesis, because it had superb in the name, and we had this kind of legacy of off-price inventory, and so we needed to go to suppliers and say, no, this is superb now.
I think also, so we, around about that time, we needed money. These businesses are capital intensive.
Sure.
Spree was funded by Naspers. Zando was funded by Rocket Internet, big fund out of Europe who was big into e-commerce at the time. And we were funded by angel investors and like really punching above our weight.
You'd largely bootstrapped this business.
We largely
Yeah.
bootstrapped
Okay.
it, yeah. And we took a decision we needed to raise money. We spent about a year in that process, 1 or 2 failed attempts, post due diligence, and then around about that time, Takealot raised $100 million. Was it $100 million?
You should have.
I remember that.
From
It was
Ti- from
Tiger
Tiger
Global.
Global.
Yeah.
That's right.
It was $100 million.
It was
was, yeah.
it was big news. And we reached out to Kim Reed, and one thing led to another, and there was a full acquisition of Superbalist. And that also focused us slightly because Takealot was the general merchandiser. And at the time they had tried fashion and by their admission not done it particularly well, and they wanted to have us double down on it. So that, that helped with a bit of focus.
So, I mean, there must have been quite an interesting discussion between the two of you over Takealot takeover, because you'd started this business, you were looking to raise funds. I'm sure when you started that discussion, your intention wasn't to sell the whole business to...
Yeah, it wasn't.
It was rather to raise cash. So what was the conversation you had at the time? And
maybe taking a step back, the one thing we haven't mentioned, in migrating from virtual inventory to physical inventory, it was the first time you start realizing fulfillment. And at its core, what is e-commerce? It's a fulfillment engine.
Logistics.
That's what it is. So we started by outsourcing and, just reaching out to couriers and plugging them in. And the business started flying. We had a really good database from group buying that we then kind of pivoted, and coming off a very small base. But I mean, we were growing 50, 60% year over year quite quickly, which meant we completely overwhelmed our very rudimentary fulfillment infrastructure.
Right.
So, meaning we had more outbound orders than we were able to fulfill. And it was terrifying, and it came to a head round about season, and we had unnamed CEOs of listed businesses personally threatening us with their Christmas deliveries. And so there was an interim step, which was actually Want It All. The Drennan,
Justin Drennan.
Yeah, the Drennan brothers. And they were kind of fulfillment out. They were Amazon resellers. And they'd really focused on least cost routing. So there was an arbitrage business. If you could deliver Amazon goods for less than Amazon themselves could, you had a business, and they did. And so they were kind of the experts and early adopters, and we actually did a JV with them, which a JV meant sending probably like a 20-ton truck to our capitulating DC, throwing everything in it and vomiting it in Justin's DC and saying help, which they did. And why it's a segue into your question is we did then understand that the costs and economics of fulfillment are no joke. And so we were seeking to raise capital, but when you look at, you can raise capital from anyone, you still have to buy expensive logistics. I think what was particularly attractive about Takealot, amongst other things, was they could apply real leverage into the fulfillment. They were at scale. So yes, you're having money, but you're having money and cheaper fulfillment, which over time is actually what you need.
Stronger in the group versus alone. Certainly part of the calculus at the time.
Okay. I wanted to ask about buying clothing and fashion online. I personally have never done it. And I suspect I might be in the minority of people who shop online. My concern around it is buying something that doesn't fit me, or it arrives and the color's wrong, or there's something about it that I have to return it. And I imagine that, and I know a lot of shoppers in markets like the US, for example, will buy a pair of shoes. It's the wrong size. Just send it back and get it returned. The system works extremely well there. What's the business of selling fashion online like in South Africa in terms of logistics and customer returns and all that sort of thing?
Yeah.
And do you find there is a bit of resistance, like with me, to buying this particular product online?
Well, I think so. If we look at the globe, I guess there's various data points and reports, but global e-commerce penetration's at around 22%. That obviously differs a lot by category and by country. Global penetration in apparel and footwear over-indexes slightly, is at 26%.
Amazing.
So there's fundamentally, I think from a demand perspective, there's no major blocker, right? But I mean, obviously we can unpack it. South Africa is very early in the journey.
Okay.
So South Africa online penetration roughly 5%. Returns is absolutely a barrier. You need to get good at returns. It needs to be seamless.
And drive the cost down too, I imagine.
And you need to drive it. So for the customer proposition, it has to be really easy, which is where we got to at Superbalist. We're not there yet with Bash. I mean, it takes time. This is like the excellence of e-commerce. You know, you can't afford to have any elements of friction in this e-com journey.
So there's outbound logistics and reverse logistics, and they need to be equivalently good.
Yeah.
And returns in fashion, I imagine, are significantly higher than in other categories.
Returns are higher. They seem to under-index in South Africa, which is interesting. And maybe it's a market maturity thing, i.e. when customers get more comfortable, they'll start doing like what they do in America.
Right.
Where we are so excited about the Bash TFG issue is that like there's a few fundamental differences from a P&L business health perspective. We've got the second biggest store network in the country, 3,500 stores. 80% of our returns get taken to stores. Now, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
The customers are coming to you. And personal experience, I guess it differs by individual, but personal experience, when I've got something that doesn't fit, I want to actually just hand it back. And we found this in engaging with a lot of customers. So,
and you can do that at any TFG store?
You can do that at the store of the brand that you bought the product, but we need to work on kind of democratizing, making it brand agnostic.
Right.
So when we do that, and of course there's technical work behind it, it's super powerful.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing, customers drop off their returns at our store network.
And refunds.
And then get their refunds at the store.
And instant, because that's the other point of anxiety is, if you've got a use case to buy a garment, I'm going to a wedding or I'm doing a hike or I'm going overseas, I need the garment, and I've allocated in my mind a budget for that thing. Now, the sort of transaction or the behavior we used to in store is I take the thing and pay you, not I pay you and then wait for the thing.
All right.
So there's that moment of purgatory where you have my money and I don't have the garment. And then if the garment's not right, I'm still in that purgatory. You still have my money and I have a garment that's not useful.
Yeah.
And so the reverse logistics is we need to, or the platform needs to come and fetch the garment, log a return, do a QC process once it's receipted at a DC. Is what you said the issue, in fact, the issue? In other words, is it damaged? Is it too big? Is it too small? And then transaction-wise, you're refunding the customer, which, you've got bank-to-bank and weekend and whatever else. So your refund turnaround time, normal in SA, could be, for a pure player, around 10 days. So it's hugely advantageous to be able to walk into the store and say, I don't like this, I want my money now. And or augment that experience by saying, I'll just take that thing since I'm here.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, and drive up sales for the group. In the process.
And so that's returns. The other benefit is click and collect. So the almost outbound leg of receiving your good, around 40% of current deliveries are click and collect, collected from one of the stores.
Any store.
That's once again highly beneficial from a unit economics perspective.
Yes.
The third piece, while we're on this topic, is we have central warehouses at TFG and we've got a whole bunch of stores. Getting an item from the central warehouse to a store that's closer to a customer is incredibly cheap. You're talking like single-digit rands to add an incremental item onto a truck that's already going to the store. So we can get stock closer to the customer, far closer to the customer in this model. And that's why, I guess, on the topic of why TFG, these things were incredibly appealing.
Yeah.
The unit economics makes sense. Plus, they have over 20 million customers. The customer acquisition expense of what we went through when you're starting a business, now you need to build awareness. You need to get people to make their first purchase. That's time consuming and extremely expensive. So, these things combined, we believe make it quite different to our previous experience in terms of the health of the business we can build from a profits perspective.
But to address your question and the fact that you haven't done it, how often have you walked into a store and bought a piece of apparel without trying it on in a store?
Without trying it on?
Yeah.
Probably half the time I do that, actually.
Yeah.
Looks about right.
Yeah. So the truth is, within your store experience, you walk into a back room, take off your clothes, get down to your underwear, have a pile of, goods in a cubicle, and there is that friction that happens there.
Yeah.
But in your mind, you only kind of relate to the point of sale transaction and said, when I entered the door and left the door, I did half the time get what I needed. So I think in more established markets, it's the same calculus. It's home trial. It's never a slam dunk. Or maybe another question, statistically, of the things you bring into the change room, how many do you take? So when you say but the returns usually are high, it's probably similar.
Yeah.
So it's I think the sort of younger consumer.
I may just be too old.
Has figured that out. Because their time precious.
I hate clothes shopping, so I should actually try shopping online for clothes. And just check it out, because I've never done it. But just take us back now. So the Takealot deal happened. How long were you with Takealot Superbalist post that transaction, and why did you end up leaving?
So we were there 7 years. We were co-CEOs of Superbalist, and we sat on the Takealot Exco, which was a really amazing seat to be in.
Yeah.
We saw the essentially exponential growth of three businesses, Takealot, Superbalist, and Mr. D, from sub-1 billion GMV into many billions, and the operational challenges that come with that, and talent acquisition, customer acquisition. So the
Kalahari merger,
Spree
Forgot
merger.
about Kalahari.
Yeah.
So it was really really valuable and thrilling at times, pretty tough.
Yeah.
And I think after, as 2020 approached, we kind of lifted our heads up for the first time in a long time. As a founder mentality, you actually didn't ever really look up to see what was going on around you. And we felt like we had achieved what we wanted to achieve. We had merged with our biggest competitor at the time, which was Spree. We had broken through R1 billion in revenue. And we were ready for something else.
So how did the TFG relationship come about?
So we had decided. So we completed our tenure in the Takealot Group the end of the 2020 fin-year, so March 2020.
Just as COVID was about to hit.
Not knowing.
Yeah.
So we had resigned without knowing that was what was coming, but it just so happened that the last 2 days of our time in the group were the first 2 days of hard lockdown.
Right.
We knew that we would be restrained, and without knowing COVID was coming, we were both exhausted and decided to take a sabbatical. And
Good time to do it.
And just relax.
That's lucky.
Yes.
But ahead of time, we knew we were going to take a year off.
Yeah.
And I had personally sort of grand visions of traveling the world and doing all sorts of things. And I ended up living in the Eastern Cape for a year at a holiday house. So to answer your question, a lot of time for introspective. The world was upside down. And I think what also happened, it created an enormous, unexpected tailwind in our industry and our sort of domain. So all of the major listed retailers were obviously forced to close stores. It was an insane time. And frankly, many of them reached out to us. But there's a few fundamentals that Claude has spoken to on review that we felt were meaningful advantages for TFG. We really liked the leadership of the business, Anthony and Bongiwe. Hungry to innovate.
So you knew them from your Superbalist days?
We didn't know them.
No,
They reached out.
They reached out to you, okay.
And
just through our engagements with them.
And the last thing we thought, frankly, of the options on the table were that we go to another corporate or a corporate.
Right. Yeah.
You know, we hadn't started as a corporate, but we ended as one. I guess that's what happens when you hit a billion and you have a huge shareholder like Naspers. And so...
Look, it's an important point, probably worth dwelling on, because I think in hindsight, this is what the leadership of TFG have done so well. Because we said to them, like, guys, before we joined, like, why would we want to do this, to Luke's point? And they assured us at the time, and they have stuck to their word with regards to retaining a founder type setup within a corporate with regards to what we're doing at Bash. So, for example, we are based out of head office. We have our own, I guess, unique approach to hiring. Hiring in the tech world is different to hiring in other industries. And that was really important to us, just in terms of allowing us to run the business. We've seen how...
Infrastructure, autonomy, you know, you think of red tape and an IT-led organization, the whole organization's on Microsoft. We are Google evangelists. We're like, that's not going to work for us. So we moved to Google. They're on Teams, we were Slack, and they were open to that.
It's really important because that basic thing is where so many South African companies, in our opinion, just fail. It's like just at that first hurdle, you have to break through it. I mean, so much so that like PC laptop onboarding in corporates is it's infamously clumsy. You know, you have new starters who can't do anything for the first few days, weeks at worst. You have to do those basic things, like first principles. How can we rethink some of these things? How can we rethink some policies, some approaches, improve communication, improve speed? And like that's the longer term thing that we really bought into with TFG and Anthony and Bongiwe.
So they're a big corporate, but they're allowing you to run like a startup.
Correct.
And I think that talks to some of the ingredients of the business. So TFG is a federated business. You know, it's actually comprised of many brands. And the history of those brands are various. Some were incubated within the business, some were acquisitions, and in the case of Foschini, it was the first business. And so we aren't the first entrepreneurs to enter the business, and they also have experience allowing different management teams to run their business. So it's a group insofar as it's kind of a listed entity, but actually, you know, it runs. There's various pockets of independence in the group, and brands take Sportscene, run very independently to Markham, for example.
It's quite federated.
Very federated. So that, and from an online hat on, we know that customers want selection, optionality, you know, more brands, more inventory, more choice. And whilst the likes of Mr. Price and True Words and Woolworths are excellent brands and huge brands and loved brands, a monolithic proposition doesn't really scale online. If you look at who are the greats, you know, Takealot, Amazon, they just continue to grow selection. I think Shein's got 50,000 dresses. Amazon's got 350 million SKUs. So if you actually look at the SKU width of some of these listed retailers, they are deliberately narrow and deep because that's where margin lives. But that's kind of an anti-pattern for online. So TFG was interesting in that its brand footprint was super wide and super varied. And, you know, downstream effect of that is they're also used to working with kind of different management teams with slightly different visions, trying to capture different angles of the market. Having said that, that strategy was being pursued online, which is to say, well, if every single brand is independent offline, then they should all have their own individual website and potentially their own app. And so they were kind of running, at, you know, asymmetrically at different speeds. And that doesn't work online, was our thesis. He said, first of all, we just don't have the talent in this market to build separate websites and entities for umpteen different businesses. Yeah. We know this. And secondly, the economics don't work. So our thesis was put everything in one place, aggregate all of your assets, one app, mobile first.
Concentrate the traffic.
Concentrate the traffic, grow the basket, put more things in one basket for a single delivery, not more deliveries.
Right. But it must have been a bit like herding cats, having all these different brands that you had to work with in the organization.
Well, as I've mentioned, culturally that was so...
They were tuned to it.
No, they weren't. They were tuned to independence.
Independence, right.
So there are many very
so it was
valuable...
Like herding cats.
Yeah. So there's many valuable... there's aspects of that culture that's been hugely valuable to us, but there's aspects that have been very challenging. Because it's like we need to borrow from both to make it work.
But again, it's a fascinating topic, like just transformation. These challenges, the herding cat aspect, I think exists in every single entity that is trying to modernize a version of it.
Yes.
So you have to have conviction, which we had. And luckily, the most senior management at TFG shared with us. Like, that's super important because it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of convincing, a lot of talking, a lot of buy-in.
I mean, that must have taken a significant amount of your time.
It took long. So we've been there 2.5 years, just about. And gaining alignments takes up a big part of that. But we believe it like we're building a moat with each month that passes, because as an organization, we've gone through that process now. And we believe that some of the competition, and they still have to go there, it takes time. You can't fast track some of these things. So the other point I wanted to make, and we've touched on it, there's e-commerce and then there's digital transformation. And we're aiming to do both with Bash, and a lot of where we see the opportunity is this platform that we've built and concentrating the traffic and consolidating all the inventory. And we've seen much bigger basket sizes. We've seen great conversion rates. We've seen great traffic. So, that's box ticked for now. We've got a long way to go. Returns, customer experience, and all the rest. But the long-term vision and what really excites Luke and I is transforming TFG into a high-tech omni-channel retailer, future-proofing the group. And that takes time, and that spans everywhere from how you buy, how you plan, how you choose stores, who you hire, talent density, marketing approaches. So it's that journey that we're super excited about, and the omni aspect. So it's stores and online.
There's a big part of what you do and a lot of interfacing you do with TFG about re-engineering internal processes to make things flow more efficiently and for things to work between the different brands, et cetera, et cetera. And is there some sort of ERP platform already in place that you were able to leverage, or are you having to deploy new technologies into the group to be able to do this?
Yeah, so it's complicated, but I think the concept of omnichannel gets thrown around a lot, and in most cases it's not omnichannel, it's multi-channel, and they're kind of used as if they mean the same thing.
Okay.
Multi-channel, most modern brick-and-mortar retailers have an e-commerce offering at this point in time. Certainly all of South Africa listed retailers do. So we're omnichannel, I guess. We've got a website and we've got stores. But there's no real relationship between those two things. Okay. They are separate channels that happen. They happen to have both, but they are not one. They pull from different locations. So if you take it through the funnel, can you identify customers the same way on both? So if you've got account and rewards program, does that work from an identity point of view online? Can you avail all the inventory which is in store online? ERP, location planning, taxonomies, product metadates, and I'll get into that. Payment parity. Yes, you have an in-store POS and you've got an online checkout, but is there parity or are they separate things? In most cases, they're completely separate.
And is each brand running different point-of-sale systems? And
In TFG, the brands are not. I mean, I'm talking more sort of at a macro level. Okay. This is what you encounter, and they're saying, and this, but we got all this stuff. It's like, it's not fluid. It's not a case where the customer can move seamlessly across the channels, and the way they pay it in store necessarily works online, and vice versa. So, in TFG's case, there is a universal ERP. IT is centralized, but when it comes to product and product information, because at the end of the day, a website channel, so a website or app is really just an interface to search for inventory. And how do you search for inventory? Mostly text. You search the search bar or the product listing page. Well, you can only find what you describe. Does everything have a color? Does everything have a material? Does everything have a size? Does everything have, metadata? And the use case for metadata, even if you've got the most advanced ERP in the world, offline is quite thin. Why? Because it's sewn into the garment. You don't need to describe this thing in high detail. Just put it on the rail. And if a customer says, what is it? You say, that's what it is. Yeah. So what we found was a huge amount of inventory, which is, amazing. It's the choice and selection box is ticked.
Sure.
But if I use one sort of example, one facet being color, there were 22 or 24,000 colors in the business. Red didn't mean red. If you searched red, you would see an exact match of red. But there were many more things on the site that... So there was a huge kind of enrichment, mapping, taxonomy job, which is not an ERP problem so much as a data governance and kind of upliftment problem. So that was one of the biggest hurdles, which I'm happy to say we've...
Data and data integrity, like we're super proud of what we've managed to do.
Did you have to hire a whole team of people to...
We've got a great team.
Yeah.
It's 7 or 8 strong.
Yeah.
And that's the foundation.
So a lot of grunt work to get this ready.
Big time.
Yeah.
But in many cases, that's the moat.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that we looked at with TFG, the way we platformed it is, the way we built Superbalist was somewhat monolithic in that Genesis, it was one channel, it was web only. We started a pre-app. And it's linear. You have to log in, you have to find the stuff, add it to cart, pay for it, and ship it. And so the team was largely organized around those primitives. Login and customer data passive was one team. Search was another, search and catalog, payments, delivery. In that time, there's been more channels. So native app has been pretty kind of explosive. And in stores, there's many more channels because... What about endless aisle in store and app for the consumer and web and mobile web? And so we had to organize slightly differently. And the way we've organized is more like a platform business. And so at its core, we're saying inventory is one world. And because we had to solve, so it's one of the core services. And because we had to solve such hard problems, these are solved problems in pure play. Just don't let anyone load a purchase order without filling in these things. You can't get any money if you can't do it. We will not buy your stuff. So the buyers are very, very careful. Now we're trying to backwards fix a problem, but in backwards fixing a problem around inventory, we kind of went, hang on a second. We're actually in this particular core service building with a platform hat on. It's more like a marketplace. Because we're having to solve for a variety of inventory problems. And if we do mapping, we build intelligence, we do machine learning to do this, it's going to make incrementally onboarding another vendor who's got some other weird inventory setup much easier in a way that when we're a pure player, we'd say computer says no. Like fill in this form because that's the only way we can ingest.
And company who's done this very well is Next PLC, listed in the UK.
Yeah.
So they started off similar to TFG. They have brands, they have in-house brands and stores, and they've moved to, they built an online platform that at first housed their brands, but then just opened up to anyone and everyone. And So they've taken their learnings, I guess, for their own brands and resell that to other retailers, and in doing so, earn different revenue streams, different capital requirements. So it's worked really well for them. They have 60% online penetration.
Okay. So do all the online e-commerce initiatives within TFG now fall under Bash, or do the brands still have their own web presences?
Mostly. So the e-commerce is certainly within Bash. But what we've had to balance is what is a brand, and a brand, I guess, is kind of a consumer proposition that these teams need to continue to be able to entrench. So what's its name? What's it about? How do you create consumer love? And to do that, you still need digital channels. So the brands continue to control their own social media, their own
marketing
voice,
presence.
presence. But it's a fine line. Where does kind of brand marketing and performance marketing begin and end? We have had to centralize performance marketing because what you don't want, Total Sports and Sportscene both sell Nike. Before we joined, they both were putting ads into the wild for Nike, bidding against one another. That doesn't make sense. So centralizing performance marketing makes sense. Okay. But on a social media point of view, they should both be able to communicate how they trade Nike independently. Yeah. So it's quite nuanced in how we've set that up.
I read that a particular focus for you is mobile. You've developed mobile apps. In fact, I think I read that you view this as your most important way to market through these apps. Why the big focus on mobile? And are you also focusing on web as well? I think you do have a website for Bash, bash.co.za.
Yeah, bash.com.
Bash.com, I beg your pardon. Why the strong focus on apps?
I mean, I'd like to say it was super prescient and we just knew, but it was just lived experience from our previous life.
Okay.
When we left the Takealot Group, 80%, or nearing 80% of sales were on native app. There's a number of reasons why. I mean, obviously mobile traffic is huge, but native apps convert material. So if your three channels or platforms are desktop web, mobile web, and native app, mobile web's the worst, desktop's in the middle, and native app's the
on conversion,
the best on conversion rates. And so when we arrived at TFG, we had a look at their traffic makeup. It's 85% mobile, and they were severely underpenetrated in app. They had a small app. It wasn't great. They were doing less than 10% of sales, and we went, there's a huge opportunity to do this right. And that's paid off. Our first acquisition, we hired a top mobile app development team, brought them into the business, got them to start again. And
they've built our apps.
They built our apps. They toiled for a year, and it's number one in South Africa's app stores.
Android, Huawei. Yeah, it's where the eyeballs are.
Right. Okay.
And app converts better than mobile web by some margin.
Yeah, and it's always on the consumer screen.
Yeah, and there's many applications with regards to omni-channel.
Okay.
You can start adding features that apply in-store when customers are in-store, which obviously don't apply with a desktop.
Was Bash.com available, or did you have to pay someone for it?
We paid.
Was that an expensive purchase?
It was. It was. Yeah. Look, I mean, Luke can give the detail. It was a long consideration. Back
to the Superbalist naming. There we had no money. I think circa 2000, 2001. Every permutation of 5-letter names had been registered, .coms. They were gone.
And Superb.com was gone, I'm sure.
Long gone. And so I like the word. I'm still got it in a notebook. I like the word and literally just kind of scribbled a whole bunch of permutations, put them into sort of a domain checker, and it was available for like $9.
The Superbalist name?
The Superbalist name.
Okay. But so a domain website actually suggested the name to you?
It would have been one of the permutations that it spat out, and we could afford it because it was $9. And we learned the hard way what having a 4-syllable long complicated name is about. And for years it was Superbalist.
Doesn't pass the spell test.
Yeah, the radio test. Fails everything.
Yeah.
But it's so sticky now, and everyone knows it, and it's absolutely a household name. And I mean, that's the upshot. But when we decided we're going to do this again, we said, no. What you want is one syllable. We've got many languages in this country, phonetically uncomplicated. Practically, when you're working on favicons and very small surface areas and UX, the shorter the name, the easier it's going to be to work with and place logos, icons, and so on. And Nirvana is like a 4-letter domain, Meta, Uber. Yeah. And so that was kind of the goal. And the other dynamic that's complicated is trademarking. So because we're thinking more like a platform, we wanted to trademark in, I think in the end it was about 12 different categories. We wanted name delivery, name online, name fintech, and so on. And so we had a short list of about 800 names.
800?
Yeah. That's we then, you need to go wide. Yeah. You then need to put into the legal trademarking. That kind of reduced the list quite significantly, probably to around 20. And then you're dealing with, all sorts, domain registrars.
Then it's a case of what's available.
Just parking. And then we got down to a what's available list of probably about 5. We put 5 into consumer testing, about 9,000 customers. What we did is we did a mock-up commercial. Name the new such and such that will deliver X, Y, and Z from TFG. And we built that commercial, and then we ran testing, and we tested for sentiment and a whole bunch of stuff. And Bash was the winner, and we pursued it. And it's been good.
So was there a domain, someone who just purchased it in the hope of reselling it, had they? Or was
As I say, anything under 5 letters, that's been the case since 2000. Yeah. If it's being used or it's being sat, it's like property.
Yeah. And was it important to have a .com rather than a .coza?
It's a good question. We both wanted it.
I think so. Takealot.com.
Does that mean you have global ambitions?
Yeah, I think so. I think you never know. You never know. Yeah. You never know what's around the corner.
TFG has Australia and UK businesses.
Okay.
And businesses
and Africa.
In neighbouring countries in Africa.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, when back to the question on the cost, it's all relative. It's
of course.
Online is we list all brands. It's already the biggest mall compared to any mall in SA in terms of turnover. How many stores get opened every year by a retailer? That costs money. So, when you divide it into the cost of a new store with 15 brands on the platform, it's not a big number. It's going to be well worth it in the long term.
Yeah. Great. Before I let you go, last question. I read an interview, must have been about 3 years ago. I think around the time COVID was actually starting. I think it was with the chief executive of TFG, who said that in time they want to get to 20 to 30% of group sales from e-commerce. Where is the group at the moment, and how long do you think it's going to take to get to that target?
I can try first. So the group is at 10%. So
which is well above the market.
But that includes Australia and the UK.
Ah, okay.
South Africa is at around 5.
5, okay.
Australia, 30.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the exact. And UK would be higher.
Yeah.
So from a group, the adoption in those two markets is fairly high. Locally, the one thing... So you take TFG SA. Jet is a large business.
Yes.
It doesn't do R1 online. The Sneaker Factory, not a small business. We've launched them 2 months ago. So not all of the brands are online, which lowers that percent.
Right.
Secondly, something we've been super passionate about and working incredibly hard at, and it just happens to be hard, it's taking us a bit of time, is just the whole inventory accuracy and inventory dynamic of this omni-channel siloed group. Is around 60% of TFG's inventory today is available online for purchase. So to compare the two is actually not apples with apples, because there's a whole bunch of revenue coming from product that you can't actually even buy online. And there's many reasons why. Now, that's part of, I guess, this e-commerce excellence. It takes a while to get there. So that's going to have massive tailwinds. Just get all our inventory online, number one. Get all our brands online, number two. Make the experience better. What we've done with conversion and AOV. To get to 20, look, a lot people overestimate what they can do in a year, underestimate what they can do in 10. I think that's a Bill Gates quote.
Yes.
So we're in that phase. I think we can do a lot over the next 5 to 6 years. There will be widespread transformation. And again, we're not e-com evangelists within this group. The stores are critical. The goal is to have happy customers. And if e-com helps that, in-store upselling will be a part of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be a journey over the next 5, 6 years.
Let me broaden the question slightly, Luke. You mentioned that COVID provided a real uplift to e-commerce, and we've seen the numbers. But where are we now in terms of the development of e-commerce in South Africa, and how do you expect it to develop over the rest of this decade?
It's very category dependent. We see that in our own business. So in the year that we joined, which was after that year sabbatical, it was TFG had just come off online. Their online property had done 147% growth, where I think normal before that was 15. So there was a tailwind of orders of magnitude. Obviously, fashion wasn't necessarily that explosive given we were locked in our homes, but furniture, the at-home business, for example, was insane. Then a year later, it kind of normalizes and furniture slows down a bit, and there's a rebound into apparel. And I think that's part of TFG's stories. They're quite diversified, and we see different penetration figures. So we've got Hi, which is a tech business. Hi is our cell phone concession business. Hi sells 1.7 million handsets a year.
Good grief.
So they're at the coalface of mobile, and yet aren't really trading tech online at scale, where tech and Takealot would be a core category.
Yes.
Okay, or Amazon for that matter. So there's a category that we think could do 40, 50, 60, 70% compound annual growth off a very low base. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but certain categories can still have room to be absolutely explosive relative to where they were, because genesis for all of these things is what fits in a store, not top down. What is the right online assortment? And of course, we match assortment to demand. Demand is search, and the way you generate traffic online is largely through search. So, base to 100, we've got 10 searches for apparel, and we've got 8 for Hi. Why is our inventory not meeting, that same demand, and so on? So we're rebalancing, and I think that's also how we can start to grow penetration. Right now, we've got a 1-to-1. Whatever's online is mostly generated or mostly a function of what's in store. You start buying for online only, I think your penetration easily gets to 20%.
And Claude, the Amazon is strongly rumored to be launching soon. They're talking about November, December this year. They're hiring people. They've bought warehouse space, apparently. Does the entry of a global e-commerce giant like Amazon fundamentally change this market?
I think Shein is busy fundamentally changing the market under with the less fanfare. Okay. Amazon have been successful in some international markets, not in others. We will, you have to take them seriously. But, we have so much to do ourselves. Yeah. That
don't worry about them too much.
That is the primary focus. I think it's more incentive to move fast.
Right.
And it's the one point I wanted to make in your question to Luke about where e-com goes, where SA retail goes. Yeah. I think the growth becomes harder because of Amazon, because of Shein, because of these new brands. 10 years ago, Takealot didn't exist. Yappy Chef didn't exist. You've got H&M who entered the market. You've got Cotton On who entered the market. The incremental growth becomes harder. So how do you find that growth? I think e-commerce plays a role in that for every year that passes, more digital natives enter the workforce with disposable income. I think it will be where the growth is found. It's a competitive landscape because you've got the international guys competing with you.
Yeah.
But I think that's what we find exciting. Like, South Africans are a competitive bunch.
Yes.
You know, we need to get into the ring and take it to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think, what do we know about Amazon? Amazon are absolutely a threat. But what we know about Amazon is that they start with general merchandise. So I think at least in the short term, we are quite well differentiated in that we are overweight apparel.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to move into the apparel space. You need real scale to generate margin. You know, if you're ordering 100 dresses, it doesn't really work. You need to be ordering 1,000.
Yeah.
We have the largest, TFG has the largest onshore manufacturing base in SA. You know, we've been really working hard on essentially vertically integrating a lot of its categories. And I think those two things, coupled with us really putting the pedal down on getting the basics right, is if and when a competitor were to come in and take a serious crack at apparel, we should be ready. And if we're not, we have only ourselves to look at.
Yeah.
Great. Fascinating conversation, guys. Luke Jedeikin and Claude Hanan are the co-founders of Bash on the web at bash.com. Go check it out. We'll get the apps in the app stores. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with TechCentral. It's been fascinating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.